All right, you should be good to go.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So nice to meet everyone. I'm Lucia. I'm going to be your workshop lead for the beginner Python workshop. Um, a little bit about me. I guess let me first see if I can share my slides. Okay. Can everybody see my slides? Okay, so yeah, this is kind of a sad setup. The reason being that hopefully we'll do a little bit of coding in the workshop, so I might do this like dual window thing, but if you need to access anything for this workshop, if you go to the Discord announcements channel, I think Iris posted some stuff earlier for this workshop. So there's a link to the slides that I'll be using. And then there is a couple of other links. There are some files for setting up Python in Windows or Mac, and also some starter code that we're going to be using. So if you could like take a look at that and maybe download some of those things, that would be helpful. Okay. All right, so let's get started. So a little bit about me. I'm Lucia. I'm a senior and co-terminal master's student in computer science at Stanford University. It's really nice to meet all of you. It looks like there's about like 30 of you here. I'm originally from Portland, Oregon, and I've pretty much lived in Oregon my entire life up until relocating to California for college. A little piece of trivia, that photo of me in the right-hand corner is actually from when I declared my CS major. So at Stanford, they make you stand in front of this awkward nondescript wall in front of the CS department, and they take a picture of you. And it's just a nice piece of trivia. And so I figured I'd share that with you all, maybe as a little bit of a point of inspiration. All right, so now moving on to setting up Python. So this is a beginner Python workshop, and so I really tried to sort of cater this towards people who, have not coded before. Maybe this is their first time seeing Python, but you do need to do a little bit of setup to get Python on your machine. And the way to do that is, again, in announcements, there is a couple of files here. So there is a PDF file for setting up Python on Windows, and then one for Python on Mac. I'm not going to walk through it too much here, and it's not super important for you to get this set up right now, but there will be some like interactive coding parts of this workshop. So if you already have it set up, or you do have some other setup that you like to use for running Python code or any other code, and you want to use that to sort of follow along, feel free to do that. And if you have any questions about that, I'm not sure if this is maybe the function of the mentors, but you might be able to ask in the Discord channel if you're having issues with setting things up. Basically, you'll just want to download Python. So if I open up like this, I'm on a Mac, so if I open this up, it just sort of walks you through. You want to click on this like Mac installer to install Python, and then you want to install PyCharm. PyCharm is a software that is an interactive development environment, and basically what that means is once you download this, you can use this to run code and write code, and that's sort of what we'll be using to run our Python code for this workshop. And then you can stop when you get to the section that says testing PyCharm, because we won't actually be using like the rest of it. But yeah, so if you want to, take a chance to get that set up, that would be great. But again, not essential if you're having trouble with it. One thing I did notice is that in order to get PyCharm to sort of react to that, like you've downloaded Python onto your computer, you actually need to open up like the file that you downloaded Python into on a Mac. This is like in applications, and you need to like run this like install certificates thing. Otherwise, it seems like PyCharm has a hard time sort of understanding that you've downloaded something. Okay. Does anyone have any questions right now? All right. Cool. So always feel free, again, if you just have any questions. This is honestly a pretty small group, so just like feel free to like shout out or message in the chat if you have any questions. So the first thing we're going to learn how to do is just say hello. This is one of the first programs that many computer science students learn to code, no matter what language they're learning. So you're good in good company if this is your first time coding. So we're going to learn how to print hello world to the console using the print function. So I guess before we jump into that, I'm just going to open up PyCharm and open up the project from the starter file so that we can sort of have that open as well. So I already have this on my PyCharm from like previously writing it, but if you are opening PyCharm for the first time and you've just configured everything, you can actually go to open here, and then you can open the starter file project that is in the Discord announcements channel. So I'm just going to open this up. And you'll see that there's like a couple of files in here. So the relevant one for most of the workshop is going to be tutorial.py. We'll get to the COVID analysis in a bit. And then you can open the terminal at the bottom here. If you just click on terminal, the terminal will pop up like this. And you should be in the actual project folder, no matter where you like saved that project folder to. And you should be able to run your Python code there. But I guess let's toggle back to the slides. All right, so essentially the first goal sort of is to write some Python code to say hello. And some of the important ideas to sort of understand before we like actually start writing any code for this is the idea of a function and a string. So again, I'm assuming sort of in the beginning that maybe some of you have coded in other languages, but maybe some of you haven't. So I'm going to go over some like programming concepts as well. But again, this may already be familiar to some of you. So we can think of a function as an instruction to the computer. When we call a function in our code, this tells the computer to perform a certain action or set of actions. Some functions also take in some additional information, which we call arguments, and then some also give us additional information, which we call return values. So then another important idea to understand here before we get started like saying hello is the idea of a string. So a string is a piece of data, and in a lot of coding languages, and specifically in Python, that data is enclosed in the either single quotes or like double quotes. And it's interpreted by the computer as like a literal string of characters between the quotes. So you can use it to sort of write anything that you want the computer to interpret as like a string of characters. So here are some examples, like a literal letter, like Z, a word like coding, a like person's name, like Billie Eilish, or like a place, Oregon, or like, this event, HackOR, whatever you want. If you enclose it in either single or double quotes, then it becomes understood like by the computer as a string. And basically that just means the string, like the computer understands it as a string of characters, like literal characters. So the first function we're going to learn about is the print function. And so the print function takes in these data arguments, it converts the data into strings, and then it prints each of the arguments like in order, space separated to the console. So as an example here, we have print, and then we're passing in a string that just says Oregon. And so what you should see is this will print out Oregon on the console. These two little caret things, that's just sort of the prompt command, or like the prompt on the terminal. So this is how I'll sort of notate like what you'll actually see on the console. Here, the whole string like that we're passing in as an argument to print is Portland, comma, Oregon, and we see the whole thing is enclosed in double quotes, and so that's going to print out Portland, comma, Oregon. And then another way to do something equivalent is actually the print function can take in multiple arguments. So you know how we were just talking about how functions can take in like different pieces of information. It can also take in like multiple pieces of information. So here we have a string enclosed in double quotes that's like Portland, and then the comma, and then we have a comma which separates this like string from the next string, Oregon. And this will actually print the same thing as the piece of code above here. And the reason is because the print function is going to print out these separate strings, like the Portland comma string and then the Oregon string right next to each other, space separated. So that will be the same as printing out one string that's just like Portland comma space Oregon. So like, I think this is just a cool example to show that when you're coding, there's a lot of like ways to do certain things. There's not like, there's a ton of ways to do things and there's no one right way to do things. And so that just sort of shows how you can like use the print function in different ways to get the same result. See, a question is in the chat. Is there a way to make it not space separated? That's actually a great question. Yeah, so one thing I can show you is like, if I go to like Python print function, let's see. There's a lot of documentation on like these different functions on the internet. And this is something I would really encourage all of you to utilize, like just when you're learning code. A lot of the times, like some days I feel like I actually, as a programmer, I don't know any skill except how to read Google. Basically, like a lot of different functions or libraries that even I'm unfamiliar with, there's like no way really for me to know what they do except to like read about them on Google. So if you go to like a resource here, you sort of can get more information about this. And one thing you can actually do is look at like the syntax and what arguments or parameter values you can pass into the print. And so remember I was talking about those like arguments, right? Like those pieces of information you can pass to a function. One thing you can actually pass to the print function in Python is this sep or separator argument. And basically that changes whether it's space separated or not. So the default when you don't do this is that they're space separated. So it says default is this, which it looks kind of like nothing, but actually that's a space. But if you change like sep equals something else, you can actually change it and it can be separated by whatever you want it to be. So that was actually a really good question. I think, let's see, who asked that question? Ian, yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. And again, feel free to keep sounding off in the chat if you guys have additional questions. Okay, so now we're actually going to try to write a program to print this hello world to the console in the tutorial.py file. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to write the code like in PyCharm at the top of the editor, and then we're going to run it. And so if you're on a Mac, what you'll want to run is Python 3 and then tutorial.py. If you're on a Windows, then it's py and then space and then tutorial.py. I'm not on a Windows, so if this does not work, I'm very sorry, but I think this should work based on the instruction file that I saw from like our Stanford CS 106A, like intro to coding, intro to Python class. So I'm going to do that along with you all so that you can see it. So basically, we're going to write in tutorial.py under this say hello comment here, and we'll learn about that in a second. But basically, we're just going to do print and then hello world. I cannot spell today. OK, and then down here in the terminal, we're going to type in Python 3 and then tutorial.py. And you'll see that here we have printed hello. We have said hello to the world. It says hello world. Yeah, I actually just got a question. So it was a private question, so I'm not going to say who messaged it, but about if you're on a school Chromebook. And that's actually a really good question. I have tried to code on a school Chromebook before. And to me, like, I think I don't really understand how to download software onto the Chromebooks very well. Oh, somebody has started mowing their lawn. I'm actually going to close the window. Sorry. If you're on a school Chromebook and you're having trouble downloading software, one tip I have for you is actually, there's this website on the internet. It's called repl.it. So let me type that into the repl. And if you go to it and sign up, it's like an interactive development environment that you can use entirely on the internet. So it's like on a website, so you can just go to your web browser and use it. So if you're having trouble with like the software, then you can totally do this, and this will actually work. There will be a place to write and edit your code, and then there will be a place to run it, and it'll be basically exactly like what I'm doing in PyCharm. So if you're having trouble with anything else, honestly, I feel like this might be the simplest method. And then what software am I using? Yeah, somebody said, yeah, somebody confirmed that that works for Chromebook users, so yay, okay. And then somebody asked what software am I actually using? I'm using PyCharm. Again, in the announcements, there is some like instructional information about downloading both Python and the PyCharm. So if you want to try that, you can try that here with the files here. And then someone asked if this meeting is required. I don't think so. So this is just for people who want to learn beginner Python. So if, feel free to work on other stuff. Yeah, someone also said like, if you're intermediate Python, like, yes, feel free to head off, especially if it's like a late hour, just use your discretion. If you think this would be helpful, stay. If you don't, then feel free to work on other things. We will sort of escalate up to a more complicated project at the end though, because I do want to show you how like Python can be used for your hackathon projects. So if you want to stay for that, feel free as well. Okay, cool. So we sort of printed hello world, and we see that it actually printed onto the console. And so the next thing I'm going to ask is if people could print out some other message of choice. So I'm going to print out something like, welcome to the beginner Python workshop. And then you can save that. So you can either do file, I think you could save it here, or for me on a Mac, I just do Command S. And then run the command again, python3 tutorial.py. And then now it says hello world and welcome to the beginner Python workshop. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about really quickly that I find really useful is this idea of a comment. So to prevent certain lines of code from running when you run your program, you can comment them out. So comments are like notes to the programmer that the computer won't execute. So anything that is a comment, you can see in your file, but the the computer itself won't run that line in the program. So an easy way to comment out, if you're commenting out like one line, is to just add this like the hashtag or like pound symbol to the front of it, and that will comment it out, and then it won't run. One way to do multi-line comments is you can either do 3 single quotes and then stick your code, your multi-lines of code into it, and then that will comment it out. Or you can also do 3 double quotes if you'd prefer. And same thing, stick your code in here, and anything in a comment will not run, or anything that is a comment, I guess, will not run. There's some questions about the PyCharm. Yes, you want to download the community one, but I actually think if you follow the instructions in the PDF here, there might already be, like it might already link the direct PyCharm file to download. But yeah, download community. And if it asks you to donate money, like you do not have to donate money. Okay. So that is sort of how you do a comment. And you'll see that here, I already had some comments in the original tutorial.py file. That was just to like separate out our little lessons and things like that. So I guess the next thing I'm going to ask you guys to do is, as you saw, when nothing was commented out and I ran the program, we get like both of our lines, the hello world and our like own comment, right? So now maybe comment out the line printing out hello world. So only your message is printed to the console, your personal message. So I'm going to comment that out, and then I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to call python3 tutorial.py again to run it, and I get welcome to the beginner Python workshop only. I don't get the other line, even though the other line is like on the file. So basically this allows me to just see this line of code, but the computer does not run it. So that is a handy tool for when you're debugging code and when you're working with other people. It just like helps explain sort of what's going on to other people as well. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about data types. So we already talked about one data type, which is the string that's like in these like single or double quotes. So let's talk about a few other data types. There is integers, floats, and booleans. So an integer is a piece of data that the computer interprets as a whole number. So like 1, 987, something like that. A float is a piece of data that the computer interprets as a decimal number, so like 3.14 or 1/2 or whatever else. And then a Boolean is a piece of data with only one of two special values, true or false. So this one is a little bit funky. I think like the other types of data you might see like maybe even in a math class or something like that. But this like Boolean idea is kind of unique to like computer science and unique to programming languages, but it's not unique to Python. And you'll see that this is very useful when you want to like reason about different pieces of data and things of that nature, like figuring out whether something is true or false will become really useful. And that's when Booleans sort of come in handy. So why do we need different data types like in the first place? Well, the data types tell the computer how to treat different types of data and how to perform operations on them. And one thing you'll actually see about Python in a second is that Python is pretty convenient when it comes to data types. A lot of the times you don't need to explicitly tell the Python program what your data type is. Python will just sort of infer it for you. And that's actually one of the really nice things about starting to code in Python versus some other languages where you have to explicitly declare the data types of different things. But let's start by just like considering this operation, this plus operation. How might we expect a plus to act on integer data versus string data? So for integer data, say like I had an example and the example was like, 5 plus 6, like, and I like typed that and I said like print 5 plus 6, where we're just like adding these two numbers. What would you guys expect to happen if I said like 5 plus 6 to the computer or to the program? Feel free to either shout out or, type in the chat or just like sort of think about it.
Just basic arithmetic, it'll be
Yeah.
11.
Exactly. And, computer programmers hate basic arithmetic. So, if you can force Python to do it for you, why would you ever do that for yourself? But yeah, exactly. So basic arithmetic, it's just going to do print like 5 plus 6, and it's literally going to print out 11 for you. But then what about string data? Like, what if I had a string that was hello and then another string that was world? Like, what would I want it to do if I put a plus in between it? Even if like they're not numbers and it doesn't really have like addition would not have meaning in the traditional sense, maybe what would we want it to do, or what do we think it would do?
I guess just combine the two strings into one.
Yeah, so that's exactly what it does. And you're thinking like, yeah, if two things are strings, like why would I want to add them? Like they might not actually be integers or numeric data, so that doesn't make sense, but exactly. Instead, Python will use this operation to concatenate strings. So what that basically means is it literally just takes the strings and like glues them next to each other, which seems like honestly like a useful thing for strings and probably what you would like expect as the analogy. So that is like an example of why we have data types and like the differences. So let's try a little experiment. So under the data types section, let's type up these two lines and then you can like try to guess what they'll do and then actually type them out and then run it and see what they will do. I'm actually, for each section, I'm going to comment out the stuff that I wrote in the previous section. If you're on a Mac, one way you can do like all the lines at once is you can highlight it and then do command and then the /. So I think that's command plus / after you highlight the lines, and that will quickly comment out all the lines. So for the data types, we're going to do 1 plus 2 plus 3, and then we're also going to print out like the string 1 plus the string 2 plus the string 3. And you can think about a little bit like, what do you think will happen? Like, even if you don't really have PyCharm set up now or REPL or whatever, you can sort of take a look at it and think like, maybe what do you think this will do? And then we'll take a look at it by running our command for the file again. All right, so we see that the first line prints back 6, and then the second line prints back 123. So we see exactly what we just talked about happen, right? So the first line is like literally 1 the integer plus 2 the integer plus 3 the integer, which is 6. And then the second line is like 1 the string plus 2 the string plus 3 the string. And so those are not interpreted as actual numbers, and so it like will glue them next to each other. So that's why it's like 1, 2, 3, like that. Does that make sense to people? Does anyone have any questions about that? Cool. Okay. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I have a question about the second part. What would be like a use case for that?
Yeah, so concatenating strings is honestly quite useful for a variety of things. Like, we'll see in a later example with a function. Say you're trying to say hello to like a bunch of people or something, and everybody has a different name, right? So you have like your base, like whatever was your original greeting, and then you could like customize that greeting for people. So like if you're building a chatbot, then that might be something you want, right? So you could ask in the command line, like, what's your name? And then someone could give you that name as a string, and then you could like send them a greeting that's like a custom greeting, something like that. And that will also be useful if you're doing like front end stuff, building a website. Sometimes, again, you want something like custom from a form to show up for a given person or something like that. But yeah, there's a lot of like useful like reasons why we would want to sort of glue the strings together, I guess. It's just sort of to create like a custom string of some sort.
I see. So from like my understanding is just like when you have like a long list just to make it easier and more efficient, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm sure there's like other like use cases too that probably I have not even been exposed to, but yeah, that's definitely like a base one. I've seen another comment about the PyCharm. So again, if you go to the announcements, there is like some like a post that I wrote about sort of all of the materials for today. Hopefully these will actually help you. Like it'll tell you what to do with PyCharm, like how to configure it for you know, our use case. And so maybe try that. Okay, cool. So you can also use int5 to turn strings into ints. Yes, and you looked that up. That's great. Yes, so that is called casting. So that's actually in the chat. There's Ian saying like you can say int around a string that is a number, like the number 5 as a string, and that will turn it into the integer 5. And yes, that's also really useful sometimes when you want to convert like a number that's an actual number into a string or the other way around. And so that's called casting. It's really convenient in Python. You basically just take whatever is the data type that you want to convert it to, and you write it like on the outside like a function. And then it'll actually do that, which is pretty cool. So computers can do a lot of other operations on integers, similar to what you see in a math class. So we went through addition, but you'll also see subtraction, multiplication, division. And then some of the sort of more interesting things maybe are the equality and the inequality comparison. So basically what that means is it can compare two numbers. So if you have a number that's like 2 and then you put these two symbols in between equals, and then you can check like, does 2 equals like some other number like 5? And if they're unequal, then the comparison like 2 equals 5 will return like false, like a false value. And then if it's like actually equal, like 2 equals 2, you'll get a true value. And that is one of the places where the Booleans that I was talking about earlier will come in. And you can do similar things for inequality comparisons, less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. So this is something you can do. You can try printing out these statements and seeing sort of what you would like you could guess what you would expect these to print, and then you can actually try that out. And we see that those three all print true because these three are all true statements. You could also do a false statement like print 7 is equal to, 6 or something, and you'll get false like that. All right. So let's move on to the next section. Variables. So a variable, again, is a concept that you'll see in a lot of other programming languages. I would say that Python is one of the languages where it's easiest to actually declare variables. And this has to do with the reason I was talking about earlier, which is that in a lot of other programming languages, you actually have to declare the data type of whatever variable you have before you use it. But in Python, you can just sort of give it a name, assign it something, and Python will like infer what is the value of your data and what it's supposed to be doing with it. And so that is really helpful. So at a high level, that's sort of what's going on. So a variable is yes, that is so convenient. Yes. We will learn like throughout this workshop. I have a great appreciation for Python and its readability and the way it sounds a lot like English. I think it makes it a lot easier for people to get started with coding, which I think is great. So a variable is a storage container for data. Each variable has a name, a value, and a data type. So as an example here, you have a variable name. So I'm naming this favorite food. I'm very food motivated just and oriented as a person. So a lot of the examples will be like that. So it says favorite underscore food, and that's the name of the variable. And we're gonna assign it a value. So our value, my value here is sushi as a string. And then the data type sort of the variable is whatever is the data type of the value, which is a string in this case. So you can try printing this out for yourself. So, create a favorite food variable and then give it some value, whatever value maybe is applicable to you, and then print that out. So one of the cool things is, like you see in this example, you can apply functions and operations to variables just as you would with the underlying data values. So like here, you could print out like sushi as a string, right? But you could also print out favorite food, the name of the variable that's holding it as a string, or print out that string variable, and then you'll also get sushi as what's printed out. So that is very useful. Variables just like store underlying data, and then you can like apply whatever function or operation you were going to use originally. Yeah, what's up, Greg?
Why did the print not like, can you go back to the slides for a second? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You see the print part that says favorite food? Why does it not need parentheses?
You mean why doesn't it need the quotes?
The quotes, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, so it's because we're referencing here the variable instead of the underlying value. So like the underlying value is the sushi, which is like a string piece of data. And so you need to put it in the quotes. But then favorite food is just the name of the variable. And so for variables, we don't need quotes regardless of whether the underlying data is a string or an integer. It's just like a name that we can reference. And then when you use it, it'll like actually look at the underlying data, but you don't actually need to define it in any way or cast it as like anything specific. Again, a really nice part about Python, but like in a language like Java, you might actually have to do something like integer favorite food or string favorite food, something like that to specify. But in Python, you just write the variable name equals to some data value. So if it's a string value, you do need to cast that in quotes. If it's an integer, you just write the number, and then you can print that variable name directly, and then it'll access the underlying data. Yeah. Cool. So let's do, I forgot actually declaring the variable. And again, feel free to customize this for yourself so that everyone is having a little bit of fun here. Okay. Yeah, and we see for me, that's a sushi. And it's like, why would you want to do this? Well, maybe like tomorrow, I don't know, you get bored and you're like, my favorite food now is like ramen. So then you like change favorite food, and then, or actually maybe a better example is you just change the value here. So you change like this to ramen, and then you print it out again, and now it's ramen. And this can be helpful when you're writing code where you are using one piece of information a lot. Right? So you're calling it here, you're passing it into some function there, like you're using it all over the place, but then like tomorrow you decide that you want to give that variable a different value, you can just assign it a different value once, and then it like proliferates everywhere else, right? Because it's referencing the variable, which is holding a value, but not actually the value itself. Whereas if you wrote like print and you actually wrote like sushi here, and then you did like other things with this sushi string, you would have to change all of them to ramen. Whereas here you can just change the favorite food variables holding ramen, and then it proliferates everywhere. Cool. Okay, so another lesson, we are moving through this at a good pace. Okay, I'm proud. Okay, so for lesson 4, we're going to talk about lists. And a list is sort of like a variable, but more intense in the sense that a list is called a data structure, and that can hold multiple pieces of data. So a variable holds like, it's a container for one piece of data, and then a list can actually hold multiple pieces of data. And this is a really useful and cool data structure in Python specifically. A lot of other programming languages have similar data structures. You might hear like a vector or an array. A lot of those are very similar, but there's just like a lot of useful stuff you could do with a list in Python. So we're going to try this. So here we're going to initialize a list and then add your favorite foods to it. So here, instead of favorite food, we have favorite foods because we're storing multiple. And then you can use this function. So this is a function that acts on a list. So you have a favorite foods list and you have it equal this like bracket, which initializes an empty list. And then you can add items to the list. So you can, acting on your favorite foods list, which is empty at the beginning, you can do .append, and this is a different type of function. Again, you can like Google this, and you can Google other functions that you can that act on lists. And so you do append, and then you like append whatever like element you want to append to the list, and it'll append it in the order that you're writing them. And again, feel free to customize this to whatever is relevant to you. Like that. And so again, this line initializes the empty list, and then these lines actually append actual data into it. Oh, thank you. So for what this like list looks like under the hood, I drew like a bad diagram. This is sort of kind of what's happening under the hood. Basically, there is a favorite foods like list, and then you can imagine it sort of like these little cells in like a table or something, where there you have your items in the order that you added them. You have sushi, and then you have tacos, and then you have ramen. And then I put these little indices at the bottom of the table, and those tell you like where the data is. So sushi is at like position 0, tacos is at position 1, and ramen is at position 2 because we added them in that order. And then, as we'll see with many things in computer science, we index from 0 instead of 1. I guess there's many like philosophical reasons for that decision, but for now, all you need to know is like the first item will have index 0, and then you go from there. And one way I like to think of a list is that it's sort of like a street. So your list name is the street name, and then there are these house numbers that are the indices like 0, 1, 2. And then to access the data held at like a particular house number, we can index into the street at the location we want. So what we can do is something like this list name, favorite foods, and then these brackets, and then we can index into a specific index 1. So what does favorite foods 1 hold, or what do you guys think it might hold? Yeah. So it looks like tacos. Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, you can explore that a little bit more. So you can print out different things. So print favorite foods will print out the whole list. And then you can also print out things at specific indices. So I'm going to print out what was at favorite foods. So we can see that the main like printing out the whole list will print out like sort of something with brackets around it, which sort of like represents the whole list with sushi, tacos, and ramen in their appropriate positions. And then if we index into it, we can see like favorite foods 1 is tacos. And you can also index into the other 2 indices, but I'm just going to not do that. But you'll see that favorite foods 0 holds sushi and favorite foods 2 holds ramen if you initialized it the same way I did. But if you didn't, then obviously it'll hold whatever you wrote in it. So another really cool thing that I really find useful about lists is that you can slice into the lists. So what that means is you can take like a part, like a subset of the list. And so you can try printing out like favorite foods 0 to 2, or favorite foods 1, and then this like colon thing. And more generally, the way this works is you do list name and then some index I colon some index j. And this takes the slice of the list from the start index, starting inclusively at the start index, up to the end index j that's exclusive. And so what that means is it'll start at index I and go up to, but not including j. So it'll be 1 before j, essentially. And if the start index isn't provided, it'll be assumed to be 0. And if the end index is not provided, it'll be assumed to be the length of the list. So for example, print favorite foods 1 and then colon will start at index 1, which originally held tacos, and it'll index through the end of the list, which in this case would be including ramen. So that would be tacos and ramen, but not including sushi. So we can try that and print that out, and you'll see tacos and ramen, but not sushi. And so it starts out index 1, which holds tacos, and then it'll go all the way to the end of the list, which is ramen. And there's a lot of other things you can do with lists, but we've explored like some of the basic functionality here. Here are some extra like pieces of documentation also if you want to explore more about them. So some other ideas that are really helpful and useful are trying to like deal with control flow. So that sort of means how we're moving through our program. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is an if statement. And a good way to think about the if statement is it's a question with a yes or no answer. If the answer to the question is yes, then the statement will evaluate to true, and the code inside the if statement block runs once. We can also use this if-else statement. So if the answer to the question is yes, it evaluates to true, and the code inside of that block runs. Else, if the answer to the question is no, the code inside the else block runs. And then there's also a more complicated like if-else statement as well. And so what do we think this code will do? So we have a variable a, which is equal to 2, a variable b, which is equal to 8. And then it's saying if a is less than b, then we'll print out a is less than b, and then else print a is greater than or equal to b. So either this evaluates to true or not. If it evaluates to true, we print what's inside that block. Otherwise, we print what's in the other block. So what do we think that this will print? Yeah. What's up, Greg?
I think it's going to print the first one.
Yeah, so you're right. This will print the first one because 2 is actually less than 8. Exactly. So we're running a little short on time, and I do kind of want to show you the project at the end. So I'm going to try to move through some of this a little faster. And so you can type this in your file if you want, but I think I'm just going to maybe just move through it. The next idea is a for loop. And a for loop repeatedly runs through some piece of code for some number of times. So there's a lot of different syntax for doing this similar idea in a lot of different programming languages, but in Python, it's pretty clean. You do for I in range, and then you specify some number of times, and then whatever is inside this for loop will happen the amount of times that you say. So as a descriptive example, for I in range 7, print, this statement will print 7 times. And this statement will print 7 times. So let me do that real quick. And then we see it actually does print 7 times. Okay. And then how does that like actual for loop work? The way it works is I here is actually a variable that starts at 0. And every time it goes through the loop, the program adds 1 to the integer that's held in I. So the first iteration is 0, the next iteration it's 1, 2, so on. And then it keeps checking, is that number less than what number you wrote here for the number of times? And if it's less than that, it'll go back into the block and run whatever code's in it, and otherwise it'll stop. So that's sort of like how the computer itself keeps track of how to do a for loop. And so one way you can see that a little bit more clearly is if you write a for loop like this that actually prints out I, and you can see the value of I grow. So it starts at 0 and then it goes up to 6. And the reason after 6 it stops is because the next time it increments to 7, and the computer is basically checking, is I less than 7? And 7 is not less than 7. So that's why it stops then. And here we see also that indexing from 0 again. You can also use a for loop to iterate through a list. So we had our favorite foods list from before here. And there are two main ways that people might access, like loop through all of the items in the list and go through them. So the first is we have like favorite foods, and then we have our list of 3. And so again, this is another way to initialize the list. You could either initialize it like as an empty list and then append the items, or you can literally just like initialize it like this, and this will get you the original list that you had. And we're going to do a for loop over the list. So there's 2 ways to do that. The first way is you can leverage this I. Remember how we were talking about how the I will like increment up? You can use this as an index into the list, because remember, like originally favorite foods 0 would get us like sushi. So now when I is equal to 0, favorite foods I will get us sushi. And then when like I is 1, then favorite foods I will get us tacos. And so that's really convenient. And so the way you want to do this is the stopping point will be the length of favorite foods. And the math there is a little bit weird. Basically what happens is like with this list, you have a length of 3. And so for I in range 3, and that will go through the 3 items, but the first index is 0 and then 1 and then 2. But once it gets to 2, it'll be like 2 is less than 3. Great, it is. I'm going to keep going. So like favorite foods 2 is ramen. And then when I is equal to 3, it'll be like 3 is less than 3. Okay, that's not true anymore. And then we stop. So the logic is a little bit weird, but just like trust me on this. Basically, you'll write the length of whatever your list is here. So that's one way to do it. And then the other way that's really convenient in Python and basically only exists in Python, like compared to a lot of other more like other programming languages, I guess, is you can literally get the element itself without dealing with the index. So you could do like for food in, oh, this is actually a typo. This should say favorite foods. Sorry about that. You can literally get like each element by looping through and saying for element in your list, print that element. So that's just like really helpful. It's an easy way to get sort of the elements of the list. Yeah, what's up, Abdi?
Yes. Is the output for the first for loop, is it 0, 1, 2?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then the second one, like you can think of it as going through indexes 0, 1, 2 as well, but it will just do it for you, which is kind of nice. Okay, so let's see that in action. This will be sort of one of the more important ideas for the project that I'll show you real quick at the end. So probably just something to like take a note of. And we'll see that both of these basically do equivalent things. And so we see sushi tacos ramen, and then sushi tacos ramen again. And that's just 2 ways. You can either do it index-based, or you could do this cool like iterate through the elements kind of thing that's basically more exclusive to Python. The first way sort of works in a lot of other programming languages as well. And then the last idea that I just sort of wanted to introduce, it won't be in the like the sample project, so it's sort of less important for now, but something that is like important in general is a while loop. So a while loop will run while some piece of code, like while some condition is still true. And so here we see an example, like if A is 2, B is 8, when we print A and B here, originally it'll be 2 and 8. And then it'll say, while A is less than B, we want to add 1 to A each time, and then we'll print it out again at the very end of the while loop. So basically what will happen here is the program will keep comparing. Is A still less than B? While A is still less than B, we're going to add 1 to A. So we're going to say A is equal to what it was plus 1. Then at the very end, when A is no longer less than B, we'll leave and then we'll print again. And what you'll see basically is in the beginning, it'll print out 2 and 8. And then once we go through this while loop where we keep incrementing A up until it's no longer less than B, when we print it at the end, it'll be 8 and 8, essentially. And again, not going to write this one out because it's not as important for what we're doing. But again, feel free to try this after the slides are in announcements. All right, so I'm going to use a little bit of discretion and skip this revisiting functions part because we did talk a little bit about functions at the beginning, but this sort of just explores the idea of a function a little bit more. And I'm just going to push into this like towards the real world application section because I think this part is kind of cool. We might not have enough time to actually deal with a lot of the setup and stuff like that, but I encourage you to sort of take a look at this. So basically, this project will analyze some COVID-19 trends in this other file that we have. So there, you can sort of open up 2 files, covidanalysis.py and covidanalysis.example.py. So the example.py file is the like full version. So this is ready to run. So you don't have to do anything with this. You can just run it if you want to see what happens. And then the COVID analysis has the main function blank if you want to try actually coding it up yourself. But basically, this mini project was meant to introduce some Python libraries that might be useful both for this COVID analysis project and maybe your hackathon project. So this is why I really wanted to get to this. I think one really good thing about Python is that there are a lot of different libraries that are ready-made, high quality, and have really good documentation to do a lot of different things, specifically around data manipulation, that can be really useful. So some of these libraries are like datetime, which is a library that comes with the Python standard library for manipulating times and dates. Pandas, which is a library for data manipulation and analysis. NumPy, which maybe some of you have heard of, which adds support to Python for multi-dimensional arrays and other things. And you can think of a multi-dimensional array as basically a generalization of a list. So it's just like a list, but 2-dimensional, or a list 3-dimensional, or however many dimensions you want. So that's pretty cool. And then matplotlib, which is a plotting library in Python that I end up using a lot. And again, all the slides are available in the channel, so you can like take a look at this later as well. And to download these, you can use pip, which is a package management software written in Python, and it should already come with your version of Python. And you just type into the terminal pip3 pandas, pip3 numpy, pip3 matplotlib, and that should download the packages for you. And essentially here, I'll just demo the project real quick so we can just take a quick look at it. We might not have time to get through everything, but if I run Python 3 COVID analysis example, and if you have all of the like libraries you need downloaded, then what you'll see is it'll return the number of days where new cases exceeded 100,000. So there were 97 days so far from the data pulled from like last January to this March. And you can sort of see a plot of the number of new daily cases per day, and then the 100,000 case threshold. And then we can see this like really bad spike that happened basically this fall and early winter. And so you can sort of really visualize what's going on in the United States as far as COVID cases go. And this is sort of just like a mini project, a little bit of a data analysis to show how maybe you could use Python and real world data to do a little bit of analysis and explore some different trends and things of that nature. I see a question. Go ahead, Greg.
How do I get the libraries?
Yes, so you can download them using pip. So pip should come already with your Python download. If it doesn't, you might need to do a little bit of Googling, but essentially you can just type these commands into your command line, like into terminal. So like pip3 and then pandas. And oh, it says it doesn't know pandas. Wait, what's happening?
I'm trying them right now.
Does it also say it doesn't? Wait.
Give me a second. I'm putting it in.
Oh, this should work.
Pip3.
Wow, it doesn't know what's happening. Okay, this is a bit odd. Okay, this worked the last time I tried it. You should be able to use pip to download things in general. That's how you can download a lot of Python libraries. I actually don't know why it's doing this. I think I actually like got rid of some binary file that I thought it would be okay, but then now it's not okay. So I actually think I deleted something and that's why it's not working for me. I already have them downloaded, so I guess for me it's less of a problem, but for other people, hopefully pip works. You can like sort of Google on the internet. There should be a lot of like tutorials about how you download these different libraries. They're very common in Python, but you can usually use some sort of package management and like literally type it into your terminal and it should download it for you.
I see. Thank you.
Abdi, do you have a question?
Yes. Which libraries does the COVID analysis use?
Yeah, so the libraries that this specific thing uses, if you take the import statement and you expand it like this, you can actually see the specific libraries that we're using. Basically, datetime is a library that's already part of Python, so you don't need to download it. And then the other libraries that we are using that you do need to download are pandas, numpy, and matplotlib. And you should be able to do it with some command that's similar to what's here. For some reason, my thing is not recognizing pip right now. It should work. If it doesn't, you can troubleshoot this by Googling, I think. But you'll want to have pandas, numpy, and matplotlib to run the example, I'm pretty sure. Those are the only libraries you need to run the example. Yeah. Oh, okay. Aaron says pip3 install pandas. Yeah, that might help. Let me see what happens if I type that now. Ah, okay, that worked. So maybe let me edit this. Like so. Thank you, Aaron. There's a sort of more detailed code walkthrough, but again, we kind of don't have as much time for this. But essentially what I did is I wrote a couple of functions for everybody to try out. Essentially, the functions load the data from a CSV file, and then it calculates the number of daily new cases from data on the cumulative daily cases. It counts how many days have more than an X certain number of cases, and then it plots the new cases. And that's pretty much, those are pretty much the functions that I wrote out for everybody. And then if you look at the example again, this is the part that I took out of the actual file for you all. And you can feel free to try to fill that in by calling the different functions that I wrote. There's more information step by step also in the slides that walks through like what is going on, you know, various questions. I tried to also comment the code so that it explains certain things as you go on. But essentially in the end, this is sort of the result that you get. And then I also just wanted to highlight that a lot of this is possible because of access to public data. And if you go here, which is also linked in the slides, this is the COVID-19 data repository by Johns Hopkins University that they compiled, and it is updated daily with daily cases and a lot of daily data about COVID. So for anyone who's interested in this, interested in projects related to healthcare and things of that nature, this might be a really good data set to check out for your project. You can literally go here and go to the code and literally just download everything as a zip file. And I think the version I'm using right now is the CSSE time series, and then the one that is time series COVID-19 confirmed us.csv. I downloaded this a couple days ago, and that's actually the file that's in our starter code. But you can like download a new version or anything like that. And I really encourage you to check this out. This is like a really good example of like well-kept, you know, daily updated data in the real world that is publicly accessible to developers to use, and something that I really invite you guys all to explore. You can also find other data sets online if you are interested in doing a data analysis project. One website that I like to use for that is actually called HackOR. Kaggle.com. This is a great place to go if you're looking for open data sets. There's also a lot of examples that show you how to analyze the data and how to, clean it and deal with it. And so it's a great website to go to if you're interested in like data analysis and visualization projects. And I think Python is a great choice language for coding those types of projects if you're interested. It looks like Greg has another question. What's up?
Oh, I do actually. I just ran install the pipe thing, and then I think I'm getting an error message.
Oh, that is sad. What is, can you like summarize the error message?
It's very long. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, here.
Give me a second. Share screen. Host disabled, participant screen sharing.
Sad. Okay, so maybe not. Maybe you could send a Discord message into like the mentors or like send a help ticket that way. And that
Here, I can give them screen sharing permission.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Natalie.
Where can we find this PowerPoint?
Yeah, so if you go to the announcements channel in the Discord, there's like a message about the beginner Python workshop, and all the materials should be there, from the setup to PyCharm to like the slides and everything.
I'm kind of highlighting it right now.
Yeah, let me see. Okay, let's see. This is interesting. Yeah.
I have no idea what this means.
Yeah, I cannot immediately give you an answer. You might want to actually just like take part of the blob and try to like
Google it.
Yeah, and like look on Stack Overflow and see if there's something. There's also like several different ways to download some of the packages. So if pip doesn't work for you, you can try something like Conda or something else. So there's a few other ways. So that might actually help as well. Yeah.
All right, cool.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for bringing that up. Yeah, definitely for these things, try again to message into the mentor channel and see. It might be easier for somebody to like personally try to help you debug these things. But yeah, just wanted to give you guys a project to sort of like throw it out there for you guys to try. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything, and my time is up. So I'm just gonna respect everyone's time. And this is sort of the end of the workshop. I'll let everybody go. I also have to make it to another meeting after this, so I apologize that I cannot stick around. But after my other meeting, I'll try to be on the Discord and responsive if anyone has any additional questions. But yeah, thanks for listening, and thanks for coding along with me. I hope you guys all enjoyed.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you so much for the workshop.
See ya.
Bye.